Okay, kicking off in just the nick of time. Welcome everyone to today's event on behalf of all of our colleagues at Bentham Science. My name is Scott here in Tokyo, Japan. Welcome. No matter where you are, we love meeting researchers from all around the world. Thank you for coming to this event. This has been a very popular event. We expect a lot of people joining us tonight. The topic is hook readers early, writing amazing abstracts, titles, and introductions. If you joined our previous event here in this Bentham Science series, we went through the IMRAD sections of the manuscript. So today we'll focus on some of those early sections, the ones that capture readers and editors' attention early. So we hope this event will be useful for you. And who better to guide us through this important process in writing your paper than my colleague, Dr. Gareth Dyke. Gareth.
Hello, how are you doing, Scott? Everything going well? Day goes well over there in Tokyo?
Doing fantastic. A nice crisp day here in Tokyo. How
Wonderful
about
stuff.
yourself, sir?
Absolutely great. Yeah, absolutely. Nice and sunny here in Hungary, here in Budapest. Let us know where you're from. If you're joining this webinar, tell us where you're joining us from. It's great to see all of our participants, as usual, from all over the world. Welcome, one and all, to this event that we're doing on behalf of our friends at Bentham Science, right, Scott?
Indeed, welcome everyone. As Gareth said, let us know where in the world you're joining us from. I can see guests from Iraq, from Bhutan, Indonesia already. Fantastic. India, Hungary. Fantastic. Oh, that's you from Hungary. I thought you had a colleague there, but that's you.
Nice,
Guests
nice.
from everywhere. Welcome
Awesome.
everyone. Thank you for joining us.
South Africa, Colombia, wow, Serbia, close to me. That's great. Good to see everybody. Fantastic stuff. We should get started in a moment. Scott, what do you think?
Sure, just a moment. Our guests joining from China, we are turning on the subtitles for you. Thank you, everyone, for suggesting that. We did have some issues turning on the captions last time. We'll try again and see if we can get the captions going for you in Mandarin. So, again, to our guests in China, thank you for joining us. We'll try to get the captions going for you. If we fail to do that, we apologize, but we'll do our best. And welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Bentham Science, Gareth, tell us a little bit about Bentham Science Publishers.
Yeah, we've been doing these events now for a number of years for our friends and colleagues at Bentham Science. If you haven't heard of Bentham before, now's your chance. An absolutely fantastic publisher, founded in 1993 with more than 120 journals, hybrid journals. So those are traditional journals that can be converted to full open access, as well as a smaller group of full open access journals, more than 1,400 ebooks, and loads of other solutions for researchers around the world. So if you're looking for a great place for your next research article, look no further than Bentham Science, a fantastic and robust peer review process listed in all of the major indexes. Scott.
And if you are a librarian joining us from an institution, you can get free access to the full Bentham library for 3 months, completely free, with no obligation, no strings. There's a QR code on the screen there. You can scan that. That will take you to the trial sign up page. Just fill in the form, and the Bentham team will get back to you and set you up with a trial for your institution. It has the complete collection, including impact factor journals, and it'll be updated each month for the 3 month of your trial. And you can continue your subscription if you like it. If you don't, there's no obligation, and you can just finish the trial after 3 months. But we're sure that you'll find it useful for your institution and for your researchers.
If you have a librarian friend, you can send a screenshot of this slide to them. We're okay with that as well. It's absolutely fantastic. More than 40 impact factor journals, many of which are listed in Scopus, many of which are listed in Science Direct. Absolutely fantastic. I think we're about ready to get going with our webinar presentation today. Scott, how are we doing so far?
Just before we start, let me just confirm with our colleagues joining us from China. I have switched on, I believe I've switched on the Mandarin captions. If you could let us know. If not, I apologize. We'll try to get that sorted for next time. So hello to all of our guests joining us from China and also from the University of Mara. Lots of guests joining us from there today. Thank you as well. Great to see everyone. So hopefully the captions are working for you in Mandarin for our guests in China. If not, we'll try to sort that out for you next time. In the meantime, we've got the English captions turned on. I hope that will help So apologies for the lack of captions in Mandarin. We'll try better next time. Gareth, over to you.
We are spending a lot of time these days doing researcher training events all over the world. So it's great to see so many people in this one from so many different countries. I noticed Oman, Nigeria, like when I was last looking at the chat. Fantastic to see you. What we do in these events, as you may know if you've attended any of them in the past, is we take researchers around the academic publishing hamster wheel, as we like to call it. And you can see here the different stages of the research cycle. And we have events, we have training, we have a small company called SciTrain. Do check us out if you're interested in events for your university or your students, helping researchers with all of the different stages of academic publishing, the hamster wheel, as we like to call it. And today, we're down at the bottom in stage 5. We're going to talk a little bit about article writing, some tips and tricks for English writing that will help you, we hope, to structure and write a more effective research paper the next time you have to do it in English. So here's what we're going to talk about in our event today. We're going to begin with some information about the famous IMRAD article structure. Then we're going to talk about how you can write effectively a fantastic introduction section to your next paper. And then we'll move on and talk about the abstract and the title, which are two of the most difficult components of academic article writing. So IMRAD structure, writing the introduction, writing the abstract, and then finally writing the title in our event today, brought to you in partnership with our friends at Bentham Science. So let's dive in, let's get going, let's begin by talking a little bit about the IMRAD academic article structure. What is that? And why is it a good idea to adhere, to stick, to use it if you're a researcher writing a certain kind of academic research article? Here it is. We usually describe it graphically in the form of an egg timer shape, an hourglass shape, because this is the overall shape that your research article will actually have if it's well written and effective. A broad and general introduction that gets narrower as you move down towards the methods and results. And we'll talk about how that works in a moment. And then a discussion section that does the opposite, that starts off very specific and then gets broader, gives the reader the interest, the broad context to the study. And we'll talk in this event and in our other events. You can have a look at the Bentham Science YouTube channel if you'd like to get access to recordings of previous events that we've done for Bentham Science, how you can logically link all of your ideas together as you put a manuscript together. So we'll talk about that as well in a moment. But we do like to begin with this kind of slide because, of course, when you read an academic research paper, you start at the beginning and you work through the paper, hopefully, until you get to the end, and then you stop. Your reading order, as you can see here, is quite different, as we're going to talk about in our event today, to the writing order. We like to call this the right order for putting a research paper together. It's much better, it's much more effective, it's much easier if you structure your writing in a certain way and you put your paper together in a certain order, starting the writing process with the methods and with the results, then moving on to talk through the discussion, the conclusions, the introduction, the title and abstract at the end. So what we're going to do in this event is we're going to jump to the second half of academic article writing, the bit that you'll probably be doing later in the writing process, and thinking as well about how much information, how many words you can put into the different sections. I found this to be an extremely useful technique when writing research papers, prompting AI tools to help you create research papers as well. Of course, you have to balance your academic writing. So for this reason, as we talk about in many of our events and webinars, select a target journal before you begin. Check its guidelines and look at previous articles already published in that journal to give you an idea about the word counts that you can include in the different sections. On average, an academic research article is about 4,000 or 5,000 words in length on average. So how many words are you going to use for the introduction, for the methods, for the results, for the discussion? Very important to keep this in mind. Your paper has to balance versus other papers published earlier in that particular target journal. So keep that in mind at the beginning of the process. So that's IMRAD, the article structure, and how you'll put your research paper together in a different order, in the right order, starting in a certain place with the research article writing, with the methods, with the results. Let's move on now and let's talk about how you can put together an effective introduction section for your next paper, the introduction. And in an effective article introduction, as you can see here on the slide, we're going to use present tense verbs. We did this. It is known that. Previous studies have not yet addressed. I did this. We did this. It is known that. The introduction uses present tense verbs, often in the first person. Most academic articles written in the first person, in the active voice. We did this. I did this. The team did this, rather than the third person passive voice. And that's something that I'm sure we'll talk about more in our question and answer session coming up a little bit later in this event today. But in your introduction, using the present tense to start with and having a good think about what reviewers and editors are looking for when you put a research paper together. What are editors and reviewers looking for? Your introduction provides context by discussing existing information and knowledge gaps. And you can see here on this slide what the function of the other sections of a research paper will be. What goes into the results, what goes into the methods, and what goes into the discussion. As I mentioned already, do have a look at the Bentham Science YouTube channel if you'd like access to previous events in which we talk more about these other sections of academic writing. So, if you remember that a research article published in the academic literature is going to be, let's say, about 5,000 words in length on average, how many words have you got for your introduction? Well, you're going to end up with about 1,500 to 2,000 absolute maximum number of words in your introduction. So what are you going to do? Well, first of all, you're going to keep it short. 2 or 3 paragraphs if possible. We'll give you a template for that in a moment. You're also going to grab the reader's attention. Draw them in immediately to the crucial issue that your paper addresses. What's the paper going to do? That's the function of the introduction. So no long literature reviews. We don't want them. We want you to set the scene and give the state of the art, as we call it, rather than describing everything that's ever been written before on a particular topic. So grab the reader, keep it short, and no long, extensive, endless literature reviews, please, in your introduction. So Scott's going to jump back in. We're going to have a quick poll at this point. What's going on here, Scott? What's the meaning of this?
Okay, Gareth, you mentioned a moment ago to try to capture the reader's attention. Here are 3 opening sentences. Let's see what our guests think is the strongest of these 3. A, many studies have examined the effects of social media on adolescent mental health. B, adolescent anxiety rates have nearly doubled over the past decade, yet the role of daily social media exposure remains poorly understood. Or C, social media is widely recognized as an important factor influencing teenage behavior in modern society. Which is the strongest opening sentence for your introduction? Let's see what our guests think.
Really interesting. How are we doing? I don't know what I would go for. Probably, I don't know. I'm not even going to guess. I'm not sure.
Okay, lots of guesses coming in. Let's see what our audience thinks. I'll end the poll there and share the results. Most of our guests chose B. And what do you think, Gareth? What do you think is the strongest opening sentence? What catches you as a reader or as an editor?
This is a really interesting question, a really interesting poll, because I would have said actually that I would have gone for either A or C, probably like C, I would say, if you had to force me into an answer. B looks a bit long in terms of the number of words there. I mean, but it's really interesting that that's the answer that 61% of our attendees today have chosen. Let's see. Scott, what's the explanation that we're looking for?
Right. So actually B, according to our team, at least B is the best of those three examples because it captures essentially the essence of the paper right in that first sentence. And yes, it's slightly long, but it's not an overly long sentence, and it has enough detail to really bring people in. So in this case, we would choose B. Now, there's nothing wrong with A and nothing wrong with C. They're good sort of scene setters, but B is the choice that provides the most information in a capsule to capture the audience's attention from the first sentence.
How interesting. Fantastic. Well done, everybody. You are well on the way to starting your introduction in an absolutely fantastic way with a strong opening sentence. And that was a great example. Thanks very much for that, Scott. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So, as we talked about already, your introduction is going to have three sections. And each of those three sections, keeping the word count down, is going to do a different job, as you can see here. The opening of your introduction, remember that you've got that first big section of the egg timer, the upside down triangle that gives you the shape of your introduction. First of all, give the reader the current state of the art. One job each section. What's the current state of the art in this particular area? Short, not a long literature review. Then give the reader the research question, what this paper is going to address. What's the question that this article seeks to address in the second section of your introduction? And then finish your introduction with a very short ending section, ending paragraph that tells the reader what's going to come next. In this study, we show. This study examines. Have a look at any Nature or Science paper, big high impact factor journal article publications. They always finish the introduction with a section like this. We are now going to do X, Y, and Z in this paper. So that's how to do it. That's a template for structuring your introduction. But let's have a little bit of a look now as well at a thing that we call a research gap. What's that all about, Scott?
Interesting. Okay, let's see what our audience thinks about this question. Which of these three sentences best shows a credible research gap? Okay, so sentence A, no studies have examined the long-term effects of remote work on employee productivity. B, several studies have explored short-term productivity changes associated with remote work, but evidence on long-term effects remains limited. Or C, remote work has become increasingly common in recent years, raising many important questions about productivity. Let's see what our guests think.
Again, a
Any of
great
these
poll.
stand out to you, Gareth? What are your thoughts as an editor?
Wow. Well, I'm going to go now, having listened to the poll results from the first one, of with either B or C in this one, because now I'm looking more carefully. B or C provide us with more information about what's happening in the study, and so therefore more information about the literature gap. What's the audience? What have our participants said, Scott?
Okay, let's take a look at the poll results. I'm going to share the results now. Results still coming and people changing their answers. Everyone's thinking about this one hard. Okay, great. Let's share the results here. Okay, in this case, the best choice is probably B. Again, it's specific. It really shows the gap. It shows what's missing. We see gap language there, and it really sets up the reader for the answer to the mystery that's to come, and that is your manuscript. So B is probably the best choice here. So again, A is perhaps just a little bit vague, or excuse me, C is a little bit vague. A is a little bit too exclusive. It's using language that's a bit too strong. No studies have examined that. Is that really true? I think an editor such as yourself, Gareth, or a reviewer is going to jump on that immediately and say, really? No studies have examined this? So a little bit strong language there, too exclusionary language. And C is a little bit too vague. Remote work has become, of course, we realize that, right? Everyone realizes that. B is the most specific. It's the one that sets up the mystery to be solved by your results. So best choice here is B.
Really interesting, really interesting. That's another great poll. Thanks for that, Scott. That's really like something to keep in mind, everybody, when starting to put together those three sections of your introduction. How will you tell the readers about your research gap in that middle section? And how will you set the scene with a clear sentence or series of sentences in the first part of the introductions? Keeping in mind, of course, that it has to be down to within a certain word limit and the whole paper has to be balanced, thinking back to that egg timer shape for the overall structure of an academic article. So, to summarize for you, what to include in an effective article introduction: an opening sentence that takes you straight to the issue, a brief summary of the controversies and best evidence, the state of the art in this particular area, as we like to say, the most important details relevant to this particular issue, so not a literature review. And keep within the rules of good writing, as we talked about already, active voice, present tense if you can, so active rather than passive voice. And end your introduction with a crisp and clear research question that tells the reader what's going to happen next. The introduction bridges at the bottom of that triangle, at the bottom of that, first part of the egg timer shape into the methods and results, which of course are very specific to your particular study. So let's keep that in mind. And let's have another look now. Scott's going to come back again about sentences to put into the introduction. Scott?
Okay, we're battering everyone with polls today just to see what you think. This poll asks, do these sentences belong in the introduction? This is a multiple choice. You can choose one or two or all three of them. Which sentences do you feel belong in the introduction? A, we found that patients receiving the new therapy showed a 35% improvement in recovery time. B, previous studies have reported mixed outcomes when using this therapy in older populations. Or C, our analysis confirmed three statistically significant predictors of treatment success. Let's see which sentences you think belong here.
Another really interesting poll. This may be something that we have to think about a little bit when we're putting together the structure of those different sections of research papers. Remember, what are you doing with your introduction?
Exactly. The purpose of each section, I think, Gareth, you mentioned that earlier, and in our previous event, you explained to us the logic of each of the sections of the IMRAD sections of the manuscript. So that's what we're looking at here. There's no wrong answer here, but some of these sentences might not belong, just to give a hint. Let's end the poll and see what our guests think should belong in the introduction. Okay, let's share the results. Okay, most of our attendees correctly guessed that B does belong in the introduction. Previous studies have reported. So the question is, why do A and C perhaps not belong here? Well, if you look at choice A, this is a result. So naturally, that would probably best belong in the results section, right? So it's answering the research question for us without setting it up. We want to get the reader enticed and intrigued, right? So save for the results, as Gareth said earlier. C, again, also another results statement, the three significant predictors of treatment success. Again, save the results for the results. Back to you,
Brilliant.
Gareth.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great. This is great. So there's the explanation for everybody. And really, as Scott was just saying, you need to keep your introduction to a scene setting section that then bridges into the method. So as we've talked about those three sections of the introduction, but setting the scene and keeping your results section for the results and your methods section for the methods, obviously. And then you can interpret all of that in your discussion section at the end. So really, really interesting. The final sentence of your introduction will need to state exactly what your study is going to do. So we have some examples here on the slide. In this study, we investigated whether X influences Y in this particular population, or this study examines how factor affects outcome using approach. So avoid ending your introduction with any of these common mistakes and save your interpretations for the discussion. Results just for the results, methods just for the methods, and discussion is where you interpret what's happening. And a strong introduction gives the reader that clear question and transitions smoothly into the methods. And it's really important as well to keep within those rules of good writing. Don't use informal English and idioms, words like fantastic, marvelous. Idioms like issues with this have been springing up like mushrooms. The government should not let the grass grow under its feet. These are all real examples from papers that we've edited. Here are better ways to express yourself without using hyperbole, superfluous words, words like marvelous, fantastic, and being idiomatic, as we call it in your writing, because other people around the world, English may not be their first language. They may not be familiar with some of these idioms. So do keep this in mind as well. So some red flags to avoid in your introduction: writing a mini literature review, revealing your results too early, overstating the gap. This is really important. Reviewers will pick up on this. Avoiding claims like nothing is known on this topic. You're setting yourself up for criticism in the peer review process. If you write that, show the direction of the field, not just the volume, and end your introduction with a clear study aim. We've seen all of these in the papers that we edit. Try to avoid them in your own writing. So we've talked about IMRAD briefly in this webinar today. We've talked about the introduction just now. Let's move on to the most difficult parts of academic research article writing. In my opinion, the bits of the paper that people don't often spend enough time on: the abstract and the title. Journal editors, when they get your paper in at the editorial office, they will decide faster than you think about whether this paper is suitable for the journal or not, whether this paper should be sent out for review or not. And they do tend to read the title and the abstract first of all. So they've got to be accurate. The abstract of your paper should be concise, a clear standalone piece that accurately reflects the full manuscript. And we do have a 4-question based trick that we often share in these events for doing this. Write down these 4 questions, answer them with information relevant to your particular study, then delete the questions. You will end up with a 100, maybe 150 word starting point for an effective article abstract. Why did you do it? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? Those 4 basic questions answered in order will give you the structure of a well-written academic article abstract. Editors look at these first. Be honest and precise. You've got to have something that stands alone, gives the reader all of the information that they need about the study without having to read the rest of the paper. No jargon, short and specific, and almost never citing references. Although there are some journals out there that will expect you to do this, 99% of the time there are no cited references in the abstract. And readers, your users, the people that are going to cite your paper, pick it up, read it, cite it, use it, they will not have time. You know yourself, you're a busy researcher, a busy academic. They won't have time to read everything published in the field. So people typically read abstracts every day to stay up to date on research. They get a feed. There are apps that send them up-to-date abstracts based around their own subject area. So this is often the only piece of your paper that many people are going to read. So put time and energy into it. Prompt that AI tool that you're going to use to do this multiple times. Massage the abstract. Use those 4 questions as prompts as we talked about, to get a great abstract going for your paper. And the four questions, by the way, give you a structure, which many journals may ask for anyway. We call that a structured abstract. I'm not going to read this example out, but we do have in this presentation some examples for you of how to do this. A structured abstract starts with the background. Why did you do the study? Then it talks about the methodology and principal findings. Why did you do the study? What did you do? The methods. What did you find? The results, they come next in the abstract, and we have these examples. You can have a look at them a little bit later, perhaps later on with a cup of tea when you're reviewing this fantastic recording. What goes into the different sections of your abstract? And then the final question at the end, what did you find and what did you conclude? What's the significance of this work? The last part of your abstract is going to give the reader that conclusion, that significance of the study. Have a look at these examples. Build out a well-written, well-structured, informative, standalone article abstract using an AI tool, writing it yourself. It's also what you need to do for conference abstracts, by the way. So the four question-based technique does work great in all of these different situations. And now a really important point, Scott.
Thanks, Gareth. Let's try one more poll. When do you typically write your abstract? Let's see what our guests would say. Gareth, how about yourself? You've written many, many, many more papers than I have. When would you typically write your abstract?
Well, I mean, I have it in mind when I'm putting the paper together, but really, my own opinion is that this is something that you do towards the end of the study when a lot of the rest of the text is either written or drafted. So, me personally, I'd go for option C in this particular example.
Great. Let's see what our guests said. And it's interesting, you mentioned you have a working abstract in your head, which is exactly what we recommend authors to use when they reach out to editors with a pre-submission inquiry email. You probably have a sense of what the paper is, and you reach out to the journal with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you haven't attended one of our previous events where we strongly advocate both for journal selection before starting to write and the use of pre-submission inquiries, where have you been? Jump onto the Bentham Science webinar homepage, sign up now for all of the other fantastic events in this wonderful series. Scott, the answer to this question, of
Okay,
course,
let's check the
is
answer. Share the results. This is not a quiz, by the way, just a poll to see what our guests would typically do. It looks like the overwhelming majority of our guests today would typically write the abstract after completing the manuscript. Is that what you would recommend, Gareth?
It is, absolutely. As you can see here, we've put together a few great reasons why that's a good idea. Why should you write your abstract last? It's a really good approach, I think. Writing it last means that by the time the paper is completed, you can clearly see the question that you've answered, what makes the study important, and what readers need to know first. So, a lot of clarity in this part of article writing comes from having finished the paper and editing, which is, of course, the final stage of article preparation before submission. This will be a piece of the paper that you will spend a good deal of time editing because it's often the only and the first part of research articles that editors read. This shapes desk rejection, reviewer selection, reader interest, and citation potential. So a strong abstract opens all of those doors to successfully passing through peer review. And let's have a look at this quick poll as well. Scott, how are we doing?
Okay, let's try this one here. If I can launch it here, which results sentence is more effective in an abstract? I'm having trouble launching this poll, so maybe just type your answer into the chat window. A, this study provides important insights into student engagement in online learning environments. Or B, students who received weekly instructor feedback were 28% more likely to complete the course than those who did not. Okay, interesting. So this is a results sentence that you might insert into your abstract. Which do you think is stronger? Feel free to stick your answer into the chat window. Gareth, as an editor, any thoughts? Which jumps out at you as a stronger results sentence for an abstract?
I'm going to go for B in this case because there's actually data, there's actually real numbers in that second sentence rather than just like fluff, important insights, like I mean there's no quantification for that. So I'd go for B. What about you, Scott?
Same here, exactly. You're going to talk a little bit later about adjectives and why numbers beat adjectives. So I look forward to hearing about that. But I would agree with you. B is stronger. It's quantified, it's specific, great to put into an abstract. I agree with you. Most of our
Uh,
guests seem to agree. There's no wrong answer here. A is also fine, but B just seems a bit more stronger and quantifiable. Yeah.
It does. It absolutely. And as Scott just mentioned, putting numbers in brings credibility, shows that you've actually got some results rather than just an opinion. Okay. So adjectives don't prove anything, as Scott was just saying. Significant improvement, substantial increase, meaningful reduction, important findings. They're great, but they don't really give you the information that you need as a reader. So let's put some numbers in there. Let's use numbers to bring that credibility to our abstracts and also our results. As you can see here, that's the best approach to be successful in your article writing. So abstracts should not introduce information that's not in the paper, make claims that are not supported by the results, use vague and promotional language like novel, groundbreaking, fantastic, marvelous. Okay, include unnecessary background details. Remember your succinct, concise, well structured, and well written introduction. Don't let yourself down by adding additional information here in the abstract and over interpretation of the findings. This will set you up for problems in the peer review process. Your abstract must accurately reflect the paper, nothing more and nothing less. So ask yourself this quick 30-second abstract quality check test before you make your article submission. Can my abstract be understood without reading the full paper? If not, rewrite. Does it clearly state why the study was done? The first of our four questions. If not, rewrite. Is it clear what was done and how? The second and third of our four questions. Are the key findings stated concretely? And does the conclusion reflect the results without exaggeration? If your answers or your colleagues' answers or your supervisor's answers to any of these questions about your abstract are a no, then have a look at revising it before making a submission. So, IMRAD, introduction, writing the abstract. Let's have a quick look now at title writing for our next academic article. What is a good title? Well, a good title should contain the fewest possible words to adequately describe the contents of the study. Keep it short. Research has shown that article titles less than 7 words in length actually generate more citations. You are going to attract readers. Identify the main issue of the paper. Begin with the subject. Be accurate, unambiguous, specific, and complete, and no rarely encountered abbreviations or jargon because that immediately narrows your readership group down to that smaller group of people who actually have a decent understanding of your particular subject area. Above all, keep it short. Try and attract people's attention. We want it to be concise and informative. The most important words related to the topic in the abstract. Entice, allure, get people wanting to read the study, but don't over sensationalize. And many journals now, we can talk about this in a moment in the Q&A, will insist on including some information on study design in the title. That's typical for many medical journals, for example. So let's have a quick poll about article titles, Scott.
Thank you, Gareth. I promise this is the last poll today. We've been hammering our guests with polls. Everyone deserves a gift for answering our polls today. We'll send that gift out to you tomorrow in the form of a certificate and the full video for Gareth's talk today. Which title would you click? In other words, if you saw this in a database or a search, which title would entice you to click and find out more? A, Studies on Urban Pollution, or B, Traffic-related PM2.5 exposure predicts increased asthma risk in children living within 500 meters of major roadways. Hmm.
Interesting. And I'm intrigued by the results that are coming in on this poll. But, what have we just been talking about? About shortness, clearly understandable, concise, attractive, alluring article titles.
It's interesting. Yeah, this is actually a tough one. And we set this up as a bit of a head scratcher because there isn't really a right or wrong answer here. I'll end the poll. I would say the best answer is probably somewhere in the middle. I would personally choose B because A looks a little bit, yes, it's short, it's concise, but there are probably many, many studies on urban air pollution. But B tells me something very specific about the paper. It's within about 15 or so words, which is slightly on the longer side, but it's still, I think, concise enough. I personally, if I were in this field, I would choose B. How about you, Gareth?
Interesting. I would go the other way as an editor because maybe A, but with a bit more information. If I could add something to that. But this is really, really, really interesting. And as we've
Yeah,
talked about, your specificness of your title will drive citations, right, Scott? This is what people are going to read
yeah.
first of all.
I would say for the previous poll, the answer could be both or neither. If I were editing this manuscript, and I spend a lot of time on titles actually when I edit manuscripts, I would probably find something that's in the sweet spot in the middle. I don't think that A is bad or B is bad, but I would probably find something that would blend the two a little bit more concise with some of the specificity of B, but the conciseness of A is probably where I would go with that title personally. But editors
Yeah.
may vary. Yeah.
Yeah, let us know what you think, everybody. That's a really interesting poll as well. We'll have time to talk about this in a moment, but clear and specific. You want a title that's easy to find in a database, immediately signals relevance, attracts the right audience. Of course, the title that you'd use for a high profile, high impact factor journal would be different to the title that you'd use for a local, regional, subject area specific journal, for example. And you want all of the time to increase your chances of being cited. So avoid vagueness in those titles. Studies on, observations of, research into are all starting points for titles that we would recommend that you avoid. Here's an example from a paper that we wrote a few years ago. It's about birds, it's about feathers. What we did with this to get to this title is we spent a lot of time fine-tuning it, editing it, arguing with our co-authors about what the best form for the title would be. So let's edit those titles to attract readers and citations, removing unnecessary words, replacing vague terms with specific ones, put the most important keywords near the beginning, and eliminating jargon and using a title that accurately reflects the study. If a reader saw only your title, would they immediately be able to understand what the article is about? This is really, really important, right, Scott?
Yeah, and I love the example that you showed. I think the next slide, I have some questions for you because I love this example, Gareth. Um, for those, hopefully, if you can see this, those who are joining us on mobile, hopefully you can read that. But Gareth, explain to us the fine tuning that you and your team made to this title, because this is really interesting to me.
Yeah, so this is a paper that we edited like a number of years ago, and you can see the edited version down at the bottom and the original version up at the top. And we just felt that by adding the preposition and making it clear that these ladybirds were attaching themselves onto the leaves of eggplants rather than to the leaves. It's a subtle change, but this is the way that we edited this paper. It got published in the end. And often it has to do with your own feelings about what would be clearer to your specific audience. But we're fine-tuning, we're
Love
editing,
that.
we're arguing with other authors.
I love that. I love that that again, this I think is the art of crafting a title. This is a great example, Gareth, and I'm happy you shared this. The preposition onto is more, it's visual. It does change your image of this phenomenon. And I also love that you added the word ladybird for non-specialist readers.
Yep, that's right. We did that too because, of course, you want your papers to be read by as many people as possible. So here's an example of if you didn't add that ladybird, people will be very confused about what this is actually about because a very, very small segment of your potential readership will actually know and be familiar with this biological genus and species. So this is
Beautiful. I
really,
love this.
really
Love this title. It's a lovely example. Yeah.
excellent. Well, that brings us, without further ado, everybody, to the end of our event today. Let's just quickly recap what we've talked about today. We talked about IMRAD article structure. We talked about writing the introduction, writing the abstract, and writing the title. And as I've mentioned several times, we do have lots of events on these different sections, lots of content on the fabulous Bentham Science YouTube channel. So do have a look at that. Or get in touch with us if you have further questions. We'd love, 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 love to come online to your institution and present more on this or any of the other topics that you've seen on that fabulous academic research cycle hamster wheel that we showed at the beginning of our event today. So, on the bottom line, what we're talking about in our event today, would you click and read your own paper? When you put your paper together and you're ready to make that submission, final check that you make before hitting that submit button, are you going to click on this if you saw it yourself in an online search? And if the answer is no, then keep polishing, keep talking, keep sharing it with colleagues, friends, and other people that you work with in your own research group and around the world until the answer is yes. Would you click and download this particular piece of research? And with that, we're going to jump in the time that we have remaining to our Q&A. We welcome your questions. Hopefully they've been flooding in the chat box throughout the event. Scott.
Great. Thank you, Gareth, for sharing your insights, your editorial and author's insights. It's really fascinating to hear. Thank you, and thanks to everyone for your comments and questions. Great. I saw some interesting comments from the chat, especially for that poll about what to include in the introduction and what to include in the abstract. One question that I can see from our guests here is how many results should be mentioned in the abstract. So we had that poll a bit earlier there. This is a great question. Gareth, as an editor and as an author, how many results would you try to pack into that abstract, if any?
Yeah, this is a very good question. Don't forget that your research paper is going to be positioned at answering a specific question. That's the best way to set this up. Rather than lots and lots and lots of information, structure the article, as we've talked about, around that introduction and talk about the question that your paper seeks to address. So you will be presenting results that specifically answer the question that your paper is built to address. So put those results into the abstract. You don't have to put them all in, but the most important outcomes of the study should be summarized in the abstract. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. If you'd like to get in touch or anyone has a specific question about a piece of research that they're currently working on, do get in touch. We'd love to talk more with you about your own particular research, Scott.
Great. Thanks, Gareth, for your insights, and thank you to our guests for your comments and questions. Um, Professor Singh says, thank you very much to provide the order of writing journal papers. Yes, thank you. And thank you for your comment. This is something we see a lot. We see authors sometimes struggling trying to write the article in IMRAD order. So it makes sense to start with your results and move forward from there, move on to the methods and so on. So excuse me, start with the methods and move on to the results and then discussion and introduction. It's a logical flow and also great for graduate students to get feedback from your advisor. Start with your methods, share that with your advisor, get feedback, conduct your experiments, your results, share those and interpretations, move on to the discussion, introduction from there. It's a very logical flow. So thank you, Professor Singh, for joining us again, and thank you for your comment. Question here from our guest, should we put results in the introduction? Asks, you mentioned this a bit earlier, Gareth. How much of the results should we include in the introduction section, if any?
Well, as we've talked about in our event today, really you need to restrict your methods and results sections to the methods that you used in the study in a sequence, in a timeline, in the order that you did the things that you did to collect the data and build the paper. And the results section contains the results. So in answer to that question, I would avoid putting any results in the introduction. We've talked about a three template, three structured template for writing an introduction. Tell the reader what you're going to do, what the question is. Give the reader the information about what's previously been studied in that area related to that question, and then set the scene for the methods and results. So my answer to that fantastic question would be try to avoid putting results in the introduction.
Hmm. See, okay, thank you for your question. That's a great question. Some other excellent questions here. One of our guests asks, are graphical abstracts important? Great question. We didn't discuss graphical abstracts today. There's probably a topic for a completely different session or an additional session to talk just about those because they're increasingly popular, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. And many journals are asking for these. This is a great way to share like very quickly, graphically, like easily, like the information that you are, sharing in your results and so on. But yeah, I mean, you can, of course, depending on your target journal, include a graphical abstract as part of your submission. I think personally that they're very important. They're great and they're a really good thing to do anyway, because you're at some point going to have to give a talk, a conference talk, an online presentation about the results of your study. So having a graphical abstract that you can then break into different slides is a great idea. So I think it's a great question, and these are really, really important, both for presenting and as a kind of aid to your article creation structure. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent question. And actually, other questions on a similar theme of interdisciplinary and uh, publishing for across disciplines and publishing for a lay audience. A related question to that is one of our guests asks, how can you craft a title that incorporates a pharmaceutical formulation metaphor, for example, nano-encapsulating key findings, to intrigue interdisciplinary readers like clinicians and engineers? I love this question. I love this kind of cross-disciplinary thought and care in attracting people from other or related fields. Any thoughts, Gareth? We talked about reducing jargon and things in titles with something like that, something very specific like a pharmaceutical formulation. Any thoughts on crafting a title that would bring in people from other disciplines?
That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, we'd love to see that example. Like if you could maybe share it with us, if you'd be happy to talk more like afterwards. My first comment on that would be, is it necessary for you to include the actual name of the drug or the formulation like in the title? Could you not say something more general but eye-catching in the title of the paper? So rather than naming the drug or providing the acronym for the drug formulation, could you not give a title that talks about the condition or a treatment for a particular condition that will then get people interested? Because people have heard of conditions. They've heard of like, problems, health issues, and so on. Whereas they may not necessarily have heard of the specific drug that you are planning to talk about in the paper. And indeed, it may be known by different names in different countries, in different regions, for example. So that would be my comment on that. And maybe we can talk more about this particular example afterwards. Great question. Thank you.
It's a great question. And also, just a reminder to everyone, we do have an event coming up in just a couple of months in May. We have an event on building your academic network, and Gareth is going to share his tips and tricks for growing your network, including reaching out to in a cross-disciplinary way and reaching out to lay audiences to build your network a bit more and to entice more readers and more colleagues into your network. So I'll put a post here in the chat to the Bentham webinars page. If you're interested in that and you'd like to know more about growing your network in a cross-disciplinary way, then please join Gareth's talk coming up in May. I'll put the link into
Ah,
the chat here.
Brilliant. Brilliant. It's never too late or too early, I should say, to sign up for one of these fabulous Bentham Science webinars. There's a whole landing page there that Scott's just linked to. You can go on there. You can sign yourself up for all of our future events with Bentham Science, if you like. That way you don't have to think about it. You're already signed up. You'll get those fabulous automatic webinar reminders. Brilliant stuff.
Great, great. Let's see. We've got an interesting question here from the Q&A. The question is basically how to keep up with current research. It is a related question to what we just talked about today. We mentioned people who use abstracts to scan to find new research to read and to engage with. So, Gareth, I'm interested. You must be and must have been a voracious reader. How did you or how do you keep up with research in your field? Do you scan abstracts in a database? Do you conduct searches for specific things? To answer our guest's question, what's a great way to keep up on current research?
I was always signed up to like discussion forums and groups in which other scientists from my area would be talking about recent research. That's one way to do it, of course, as well as all of the other, AI tools and app services that you can get access to now, like things like Research Rabbit, Lit Maps, apps that will give you like a feed of recent research papers, published papers in your field, or you could just do it the traditional way and sign up for journal table of contents alerts. I still get a number of those from key journals in my research area, geology, paleontology, biology journals, sending me their latest published outputs. So let's say you've got 10, 15 journals that are really important in your research area. Why not get them to send you what they're publishing? I mean, that's one way to do it as well. A fantastic question. Have a look at Lit Maps, tools like that that identify for you research gaps. Cite is another great one. It will look for you at relationships between pieces of research that have been published and help you to identify new research in your subject area. Great question.
Great, and I'll stick a link to Litmaps into the chat here as well. Maybe time for just another couple of quick questions. A question that we often get, should we write a manuscript before choosing a journal or the opposite? Well, we tend to recommend writing the bulk of the manuscript after choosing a journal, don't we, Gareth? And there are some good reasons for that.
Absolutely. Having a journal in mind before you begin to write will really help you to structure the paper. It will help you to answer many of the questions that you're going to have about what to put in the different sections, how to structure the figures, the figure captions, all of that. If you have a journal in mind, it helps a huge amount as you build out the article structure. So we do recommend that before you begin to write, you have a journal or journals in mind for your research article.
Hmm. Great. Thank you for the question. We tend to recommend that order, as Gareth mentioned earlier. Maybe time for one quick final question. This is a peer review related question, Gareth. If you are a reviewer, I assume peer reviewer, and you see a citation in the abstract, what will you have to do as a reviewer? How would you handle that if the rule was to have no citations in an abstract and you're reviewing that paper? What would you say to the author as
Well,
feedback as a review?
it wouldn't be a reason to like reject the paper. It wouldn't be a reason to be nasty about the paper or aggressive. Just something that you can point out in your review. This journal, the style of this journal does not specify the use of references in the abstract. It would be a minor change that you're going to ask the authors to make. And don't forget that your job is not to correct the English or edit the English, edit the language when you're working as a reviewer. If you get a paper for review that's difficult to understand, that needs a lot of work done on the English, let's say, your next step as a reviewer will be to flag that to the editor, send the paper back to the editor, who will then ask the author to provide more language editing work on the paper. Great question.
Excellent question. I think we're almost out of time here, so just a big thanks to all of our guests, as always, for making time. I can see some familiar guests, some familiar names joining us, so thank you so much for always joining our events. And most of all, thank you to our friends at Bentham Science Publishers for sponsoring this series. And Gareth, big thanks to you for sharing, as always, your deep insights.
Fantastic to do these with you, Scott. Always fantastic. Don't forget to follow Bentham Science on all of these wonderful social media channels. You've got that QR code in the recording. You can give that to your friends in the library, and there'll be follow-up, right, Scott?
Absolutely. A mail is going out tomorrow with the certificate for everyone who joined, the link to the full video, and also feel free to check out the Bentham Science webinars page. Our next event coming up next month is Sharpen Your Academic English for Science Communication. That's on March 12th. And then in April 16th, we've got poster presentations and slide talks. That's always a popular one, always a gangbusters event. So hit up that page and sign up for any future events. We'd love to see you come back and join us again. So thanks everyone. And thank you, Gareth. And most of all, thanks to Bentham Science. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.